So, to get back right on track with what we were discussing last week, the question that we finished on that we were asking, well, that you asked me and then we asked everybody else, which I didn't answer yet, was whether or not if something or some sort of entity were to know everything that happens, every single atom that moves to the more microscopic scale to, things, major events as well, in everyone's life, everywhere, everything, all the time, and also the future, what your plans are going to be, how things are going to unfold, would that take away the meaning of free will? And so I thought about it a little bit because at first I thought to myself that I have to kind of get out of like the perspective of like being as much of a realist as possible and imagine something like that like really existing. Because of course, realistically speaking, I'm like, oh, I'm safe from people knowing what I'm doing inside my apartment, but to an extent, who knows? So I was thinking to myself a little bit, and I came to the conclusion that I believe that at the end of the day, if that entity, whatever it was, were not to act upon it, in a way, I would feel like free will would still exist, but I was quite conflicted by that answer that I came up with because I thought to myself that, like, what would I know, and how could I trust something like that would just know everything? Because it knows everything about me, but it knows everything about somebody else who could harm me or decide to do something about it. And so I think that it depends entirely on the intention of whatever that is, but in a way, I wouldn't disagree if someone were to tell me free will isn't existent now. It's not even a concept that you can even imagine because you don't have free will.
Here's the thing, right? I see what
Yeah.
you're saying, but I want you to think about this. The fact that the concept is even possible in the first place, even if this entity didn't exist, I only introduced the entity in order to introduce the concept. If the entity is like capable of executing this concept, of being able to monitor every atom that exists ever, currently,
Yeah.
and being able to kind of determine, let's say, the direction of where the atom is going to go, where it's going to do, like just by the current moment, right? Because I'm imagining it having two marbles, like and knowing the direction of one marble, knowing the direction of the other. You don't know it you don't know it like currently, but by prediction the two will intersect, bounce off. Okay,
Yeah.
and if you know the rule set fully, you know exactly how things are going, how things work right now. You'll be able to, by that means, predict the future. So if the concept exists, even if this being doesn't, if the concept exists that just by merely having information on everything, you can predict the future, doesn't that mean, regardless of the entity, that everything you do is essentially set in stone?
Yeah, pre-written essentially, yeah.
So this concept is kind of very broadly is called the concept of determinism, which is basically, as we just said, you can determine everything by just knowing, or you can determine the future and everyone's actions just by knowing how things are right now. Well, okay. Let's just bounce back to you. How does that make you feel, roughly?
How does that make me feel? Well, the thing is, this brings in like a whole entire new perspective because I think that what matters the most in this case is your awareness of that, even existing, of the fact that, you might not have all that free will and stuff. So what if we actually did not have free will at all because that, concept was actually a thing? We have no way to prove it. But again, as a species, humans, we've discovered many things and we've always, proven ourselves wrong in a lot of ways. So I would say that, further development of technology and just our research could prove, totally against what we currently claim. Like, oh, we do have free will. We not everyone knows what I'm doing in my life. Like, what do you really know? Is there, an all-seeing eye of Sauron somewhere that's just like, hey, I see what you're doing back in your bedroom and stuff. It's like, oh God, it's like, and you're cooked. So I would say that it's actually, it makes you reconsider. But again, I think that in that case, like, ignorance is bliss. So I'd rather not know. If someone knows everything I'm doing, like, don't hurt me. But I'm fine with
Right.
you existing. As long as I don't know. So.
So
Yeah.
what's more conflicting to you is about whether or not someone knows about it, but not about your own kind of Because essentially, do you not find any confliction within yourself, telling yourself that you're essentially a machine, and all of your choices, every thought that you have, every feeling that you feel, is just it's a subject to a deterministic cause of events, and pretty much none of it your own, what we would call free will, just like volition. Your volition is not in any way determined on what you want, because your pure wants, needs, your everything is determined on just how the even down to the atomic level how you work, and
Yeah.
everything predicting, and based on that, everything that you do uh, could be just predicted based off of that as well.
Yeah. No, that's definitely like just to think. I mean, I'm not saying to think that way because again, it's pretty logical to even consider that. But I would say that I think for a lot of people, depending on how aware they are of different things, will interpret their whole life and their whole like just their decisions differently. And I would say that one thing that I've found myself doing a lot is whenever I had an idea of something that would kind of like break apart my like understanding of reality, I would sometimes go deep into it. And I think that's the point of having conversations of the sort of the ones we're having right now, is to like try to think about those things. But I found myself very often in my life, in terms of how I feel about it, I've found myself in my life a lot of the time just taking those concepts and just like really shoving them to the side whenever they get really like they mess with my head a bit too much. And I recall, as like the youngest child, I remember like um, just sometimes standing somewhere and just thinking maybe my like my soul or whatever like ended up in the wrong body. And I was like the youngest kid, and everybody would just like not expect a thing, but I would be standing there in the corridor, and I remember very specifically I was going to the kitchen or something, and I stopped in a corridor, and I was like, I must be in the wrong universe. And I was thinking like, but it's possible that like my conscience is just in the wrong body. And I was like 3 or 4, and I obviously didn't even have the words to explain that to my parents. But I recall that like whenever you like, yeah, whenever I have things like these come to me, a lot of the time my habit is to just like be like, wait, that's a bit crazy. I'm just gonna like stick to like my understanding of what I am as a person.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's fair, right? Because look, I also agree that while these are fun discussions to have, um, you implementing them to actual day-to-day life is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, because here's the thing, right? A lot of people, what they'll do with this argument is quite funny. They will take this argument, this determinism, right? And they'll then use something like quantum physics. I'm sure you're aware, as a real broad information, that physics is all about randomness. That it's all like not deterministic, and that it's random. It's in some way like truly unequivocally random. Everything in quantum physics, it's probabilistic. Nothing is ever standard, like on the dot. This is how it is. And obviously then you can go down the paths of, you can obviously like say, okay, our current understanding doesn't show that, but realistically it is, and that is super determinism, when truly you claim even that quantum physics itself is deterministic. But even if you don't, and you say that, let's say quantum physics is truly a random thing, right? um, Taking that argument doesn't actually win you anything, because then all of your actions, all of your wants, and all of your needs go from being deterministic from the original theory to now being random,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
completely out of your control. So what I'm saying is that, yeah, neither way, no matter which way you think about this, our current understanding of the world tells us that through just logic and what we know, no matter which way you take it, you either have your actions being completely predictable, therefore a lack of free will, and therefore no matter what you do, you'll act a certain way always, or your actions being completely, okay, within some range, random, once again out of your control, just maybe not as predictable this time around. But as you just said, yeah, it's not worth like it's not worth the salt at all to implement this in your life, because I mean, come on, what do you do once you think about the fact that you essentially have absolutely no control over your actions, or rather even just think to yourself that no matter what you do, none of it truly comes from some source of pure unbrittled just you know, I don't know, will or need or choice.
Yeah, you talked about like randomness and not being able to predict things, and I think in it is within the human nature to try. I mean, we were talking about problem solving last week, so it's to try understand, try to solve these problems, especially when we are unsure, like uncertain of how something happens, and also how something can happen and what can happen. And I think it is actually like totally within human nature as well to try to put a filler, like a reasoning behind something that we don't have the ability to really, understand fully. And I think that's where the concept of like beliefs and religion does come in, because we try to explain why
Right.
something can happen, and also karma and things like these, like, oh yeah, like if you like I don't know, harm some people, then harm will come back to you. Is there a way to scientifically prove that? Not necessarily. However, we like to bring in some concepts like there being a god who will punish you and not send you to heaven or whatever. And
Right.
I think it's kind of normal for humans to do that. But then there's also specific people that will usually live a little bit of a different life, because they will try to explain it beyond just replacing that explanation with religion or a certain belief. And again, I'm not saying or judging anyone, of course, who is religious, because they have the right to do so, and maybe they will live much happier than I will. However, I do think that the people who do try to think beyond that and not try to replace a scientific explanation with something more based upon a belief, or imagining a certain being that is all powerful and that will treat you right or wrong depending on your actions. I do think that the people who try to go beyond that are the people that also make society move forward in a specific direction that is sometimes good, sometimes less good. But I think in general, I think that yeah, the scientists, the researchers, they might actually like be taking a lot of the. It might actually pain them, and I think a lot of the people who have researched such ideas, philosophers, but also researchers of sorts, have not had the best lives in terms of how happy they were. But they bring a lot to the table for us to think about, and for us to think further and try to explain further things. But I think that that in general, human nature is to explain things in the simplest way possible. And when it's too complex, what do we resort to just trying to explain something that will
Yeah.
ease our mind. Because can you ever come to an answer about this whole topic, or will you always be stuck at the idea like, oh, that it's random, but how do we make it something that we can control? How can we predict? We can't predict the future
Right.
yet. Will we ever be able to? Yeah.
That's debatable, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is all about. I mean, at that point, you kind of have to start conditioning the human nature. Honestly, I think personally, we're getting to a point in history where we need to slowly move away from comfort. Um, we're finding out things about the world and how it works, really, truly, that kind of break our minds to some sense, right? And the reason they do is because we still kind of cling on to this more primal, to this more ego-centered idea of what we are and how we work and what we want to be. Um, it's, yeah, I think personally, in order because as you said, I absolutely agree that people that tend to explore these ideas more in depth tend to be more happy, and it kind of makes sense. I think outside of the fact that there should be a kind of a balance in some, usually people with higher IQ have a lower EQ, these kind of ideas. It does absolutely make sense because of the fact that the more you delve into these ideas, the more you realize that the ignorance you had before about very many concepts, such as free will, for example. Let's be honest, being told, "Hey, you don't have free will, and everything you fucking do is just a
Yeah.
pre-designed concept that will just roll out, and at no point throughout life do you become anything greater than just a machine." It doesn't make someone necessarily the,
No,
the,
no.
the happiest of people.
Yeah, it's just
uh, yeah, but I obviously I'm not saying advance humanity to a direction where we are essentially just thinking beings without a tendency to care about our own happiness. However, I think it is a necessary thing to shift our overall population rather than take everybody and, for example, make them like really intelligence focused or thought focused, kind of shift the whole bell curve that we have a bit to the right. So the people up top will be able to kind of advance in that direction of thinking, intelligence, and just be able to take humanity further, while also still having this overall what's the word I'm looking for? Overall, just difference in people. You know what I mean? Like the spread, this variety,
yeah.
where we still have care for things like health, entertainment, happiness,
Yeah.
having the bliss of ignorance towards these many concepts.
Yeah, no, I think there will always be a lot of differences and there will be a lot of different opinions about such topics, but also about in general, like, what the future looks like, how free are you? But I think that there's people that have kind of like that take a very different approach to everything and that focus on, that's why, talking about people who will sometimes bring a few frowns upon others because they will, talk about things in a, very assured manner about how, oh, the stars, the position of the stars controls how things happen, and there's all this karma and spirituality and stuff. And I think that it's interesting to see like the two extremes because there's the very, Cartesian approach, and then there's like the approach of, spirituality and just believing in
Yeah,
things that won't
it's true. Which
always,
I agree, I absolutely agree. But you know what the difference is, right?
yeah,
Is in one, there is still a possibility of change or
yeah.
knowledge or just some sort of like understanding of the whole concept, right? If you're told that, for example, I don't know, if you act good and you do not collect any karma in your life, you will not be subject to any, or you'll be subject to less in your next.
Yeah.
Then you have some sort of control. You have some sort of direction that you can go to in order to better yourself. Whereas if you're told that no matter what actions you take or what you do, nothing will fucking change, it's essentially one extreme is while kind of under the same effect of you are controlled, you're not fully like, the mechanism isn't fully in you, there's something greater that has you under its grasp. You're kind of able to shift yourself and kind of like, you have some wiggle room.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one would be just complete, just, nothingness.
Yeah, that's
You,
true. That's true. One of them is kind of like more extreme in terms of what ends up happening to you, and I think yeah, with karma and balancing and things like that, it gives you more room to better yourself. But I
right.
would say that I would say that I personally don't really know where to place myself in between those because of course I like to understand things in a scientific manner, but I also can't exactly put myself through the idea of like let me just open my mind to always thinking in that kind of way, as I was saying before with the scientists and researchers and philosophers often having kind of depressing lives. I have noticed that whenever I really take my time to think about society, and if I don't have anything stopping me and distractions, I will like dig myself down a really deep hole, of just thinking about
Yeah.
the same things over and over again and understanding how depressing reality can be actually.
Right.
So
I think that the depressing, what you're calling depressing, outside of obviously the depressing factors, is just the kind of the utter and cold truth
Yeah.
that reality can be. I think I know what you are describing here because I can relate personally. I think it's important that we as people kind of, as well as subject ourselves to more intellectuality, remember that it's only kind of an aspect of our lives.
Yeah. Amongst
These
many. Yeah.
people, yeah. These people that do philosophy or science or subjects that kind of take over their lives, they spend hours and hours on the subject, and it's hard to kind of pull themselves out of it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hardly ever that people, for example, can split work and their personal life, like, have work at work, and when you get home, you don't think about work at all.
Yeah.
People rarely achieve that kind of effect, and those that do are in fantastic condition and they don't
Yeah.
have a problem within their lives. But let's be honest, people, especially if we're going to bring into discussion again, EQ and IQ, kind of weight and balance, the more difficult you delve, the more difficult of a subject you delve into, in terms of discussion, again, philosophy or science, probably the less time you have actually to focus on things like this, on pulling yourself away from kind of the sad reality of things. Sad reality. I call it sad reality. It's sad to us because, in a sense, there's an utter and, to us, kind of unsatisfying
Yeah.
truth,
No, true.
essentially. And yeah, probably the worst reaction to anything in the human body is unsatisfaction.
Yeah.
Um, but honestly, yeah, no, I absolutely can empathize with what you do, and I think it's just important to, and this will just go out to anybody that is watching right now. Um, Shit can suck, but it's only if you really think about it, and if you can pull yourself away from the situation the same way you put yourself in.
Mm.
If you look around you right now, you're probably not in a half bad situation.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, the world can be a shit place, but it's like, while it's good to look at the whole picture, you
Mm.
also have to remember where in that picture you are, because
Yeah.
there could be hell. There could, we live in a cosmos full of fucking black holes, stars that burst with an absolute, like, gigawatts of energy that if
Yeah.
you stand anywhere close to, you'll burn to a crisp within a millisecond. But you're not there.
Yeah. You're
You're
you're here still. So
Yeah, yeah. So what do you have to worry about? You don't have to worry about, I don't know. I mean, sure, the sun might blow up in a couple billion years, but
Yeah,
you're gonna be
no, it's
fine.
and it's funny because as a kid you always hear that like, oh, the sun, and you're like, you read about it at a certain point or like watch
Mhm.
some sort of documentary, you're like, the sun is gonna blow up. Oh, we're so doomed. And it's like, you realize how far that is, and it's kind of funny
Yeah.
because as a kid you get this kind of information, and as a kid any information that you get becomes a part of your reality, and you're really building your ability to just know things, your knowledge, and I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, because me working with kids, it's funny how bringing anything into the picture is really a reconsideration of what they consider like reality and how the world works. And you know, me personally, as like a grown adult, like whenever I get new information, then it gets like put in one of the many drawers inside of my brain, and it just becomes a part of what I know. Sometimes I'll reconsider something, but what we
Right.
just brought up is one of those things that will that can make someone like truly like have a little bit of like not an identity crisis, but like a moment where they really give things like a good thing. And this is why I wanted to
Yeah.
separate the episodes to give it like a real moment of consideration of trying to
Right.
understand what that concept may be, and is it something that I want to truly integrate, or is it something that I want to think about and then leave aside for another time? And I think you were just saying that when people feel like a sense of like discomfort or whatever, and they have this moment where maybe they lose, I guess, their their sense of fulfillment or whatever, because they don't, whatever they do in their life maybe doesn't matter because you can't really choose
Mhm.
what you're doing, what ends up happening to you. And I think this opens up the doors for something else that we wanted to discuss, which is also what are the things that can kind of have the opposite effect on you? What are the things in your life that can give it more meaning? What are the things that you can search for fulfillment within? And some of those being, the emotions that you may feel, because we're looking for, happiness. We're looking for some thrilling experiences rather than looking for the things that make us more depressed or that make us, kind of like lose hope in a lot of things. And
Right.
yeah, and so I want to aim that specifically at the idea of romance, because a lot of the people in their lives, as we just said, right, they could be trying to understand what their fate is, what they end up, being. And a lot of the
Hmm.
time we think, hey, I don't want to die without having experienced love, right? So what
Right.
does that really mean overall? And how is it different today compared to what it might have been in the past? So what are
Right.
your thoughts?
I mean, look, I'd say first of all that the whole idea of romance and a partner is pretty much hardwired into us as fulfillment.
Yes.
Um, it is an idea that if we find someone truly special to us and we get to spend our lives with that person, we'll experience kind of joyous memories, hardships, get over, like, pretty much manage to overcome and absolutely dominate what is our life. And I think that's what a lot of people want. They want to essentially, in its most raw and I guess blunt way of speaking, win at life. Now, obviously, this concept I think is different sometimes for people. I do agree that romance is a good discussion to set on, but I think it's important to also remember that a lot of people actually see it differently as well. People might think money, people might think
True.
knowledge.
Yeah.
It can really differentiate. But I really like that you brought kind of what is essentially love or relationships into the discussion of this, because I absolutely agree. I think we pretty much want to go down the route of emotions, right?
Yeah.
How they interact with us and how well, in quite a funny way, they control us less than we manage to control them. Just like the topic that we mentioned a
Yeah.
second ago, which is quite a funny relation, but regardless. So, my personal beliefs are, to answer your question on how it is now and how it is before, I think, well, let's say that I think. All right, let's take into example a time like I don't know, 1800s, 1900s,
Yeah.
right? Just as a very kind of rough outline. The situation looked way different back then. You had people. First of all, you had absolute gender inequality,
Yeah.
um, and pretty much that's been a subject for most of human history. Realistically, it's really, if you visualize it within the start of the Homo sapien, gender equality is quite frankly a brand spanking new concept.
Yes.
But you have this fulfillment that's and for good reason, if you actually think about it, that's more animalistic
True.
to some degree. You'd have the what would usually be the more capable, physically capable, intellectually capable man go out of the house, work, make money, come back, and provide for the family. Whereas you'd have the woman who'd stay back, take care of the house, kids, whatever, basically do everything that the man cannot while being out and providing. And it's essentially, I mean, it's the same thing as what you'd imagine cavemen doing, really.
Yeah.
It'd be
No.
it'd be the men going out hunting, whatever, and while the woman stayed back with the kids. So it's, oh, sorry. It's only recently that this concept has changed, and I think while it has removed kind of what romance and love is in the middle area of like its more animalistic previews, it's created extremes essentially compared to it. So now we either have that love can be truly a unbrittled, beautiful thing of pure emotion, honesty, and trust. We also have that it can be kind of the opposite. We have an idea of either purely transactional or just straight up. really unfeeling love, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Just
no.
I'm calling it unfeeling love, but I mean in relationship.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my view on it. Really, it's right now. It's you've gone from having this kind of overall idea to having it split. Obviously, not evenly. Let's be honest. Most people do think of when they think of relationships, they think of, just emotions, romance, love towards each other. However, it has been split to I feel like two way more extreme forms
No,
of that
absolutely.
topic.
And it's like, I think, the first idea would be that, humanity does rely on, humans interacting in that kind of way to, continue, being around, like for humans to continue being around. However, it's more specifically, that's just the biological truth about reproduction in itself. And there's a lot of species that do not, and most species actually do not, stay as a pair past that stage of reproduction. And usually the mother takes care of the babies, and the father, goes and does its own thing. There are some, species, and the human race is one of those ones which have that tendency of staying together, and that's because one of the few concepts that differentiate us so much from the other species is love, being one of them. And I think there are three main ones, and I was reading about this in a great book that I've read. Three main ones being love, arts, and humor, because love is a thing that only humans, I mean, okay, that we know, as far as we know, it's something that's purely human concept. Love, the arts. There are some animals that can, make, more interesting art than others, of course, but it's never really a thing that is expressed as far as what humans can do with architecture, with, paintings and music and things like that. And in humor being the fact that, maybe a donkey can sound like he's laughing, but I don't think he's laughing at your dad joke. He's, making a sound, but humans, we have mastered that idea of doing things that are funny, you know. Now, these are concepts that are done, and I don't know how much research backs them, because it's possible that actually, like, meerkats find each other quite amusing and laugh, but in their own way. It's possible that, two hippos actually are really in love with each other, and we would not exactly be so sure. But I think that without really having evidence behind it, those are things that are very human. And love, I think, is the one obviously that we're talking about right now. More specifically, love is really some, like, one of the biggest challenges that we face individually. And then again, our society does rely on us being in love at some point to, carry on having, a new generation coming through.
Right.
And I think a challenge that is being posed by, modernity is the fact that, like, people have less children. It's a fact nowadays,
Yeah.
but it's not yet a problem for society on that level. However, projections show that we would lose, that we would kind of lose population. We would have especially in some countries like Japan, for example, right now, which already has a lower fertility rate than it should have to maintain that population. But
Yep.
other countries are also going towards, like, taking that route. And I think that yeah, there are a lot of new challenges. Love already had a lot of challenges there, because I do think that as you were saying, there's those very different, there's those extremes. And I do think that there are, social media. We're going to talk about that again because we talked about it last time, but there's a lot to talk about. But social media and just the dating, like, I guess, scene in general these days makes things even more challenging. So yeah, what do you think are the
Absolutely.
main pain points, I guess? What would you say?
I well, so okay. Um I do agree. I mean, absolutely. It's a lot of it's expectations, right? It's essentially idealism of what we're talking about right now, which is love, and it's portrayed, as you said, through dating apps, through social media. I think that well, what is you mentioned all these things, right?
Hmm.
You mentioned the love arts and what was the final one? Sorry, I forgot.
Humor, like, yeah.
Humor, right? Okay. Uh, if you, I, okay, I don't know. exactly what the book said in it or
Hmm.
what it was discussing. But I think that even those things you could take back and break down to essentially animalistic, reactions. We love because, well, bluntly told, we receive love, and therefore it is a transactional thing where we
Yeah.
actually gain from it as well. Uh, Arts, they stimulate us a lot, and therefore also is kind of in a sense something complex in order to have us either think or enjoy what we're doing, therefore also sort of just a way to gain interest or happiness. And humor down the same route. You make one laugh because they get to be happy and you get to feel valuable because you have made someone feel a nice emotion. It's always kind of a transactional thing. And I think this does link up perfectly to the current environment of, as we said, dating apps and social media. Uh, because people have forgotten, a lot of people have forgotten, quite frankly. I feel like the latter part of the transaction, which is themselves.
Yeah.
People expect a lot of times, I feel like nowadays, to receive and not to give. They forget what they can give and what they're capable of giving. Um, because let's be honest, the relationship is at its best when both parties feel like it is fair, when
Yeah.
it is even. Even if it truly isn't, even if it practically is not, when both parties feel like it is fair and even, given their situations, that's when the relationship is at its finest.
Yeah.
Even if fuck it, if even if we include like sugar fucking daddies and sugar babies, right? If both parties, despite the obvious, obvious difference in areas,
Yeah.
one being monetary, one being just I don't know, I guess physical. If both parties are absolutely like okay with the transaction of those variables, then they get to be happy and they get to roll along, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much what the problem is nowadays. A lot of people forget that love and relationships are a transactional thing. Is that a lot of times you get sacrificed for, and a lot of times you have to sacrifice yourself, and that's just how the ball rolls. Um, I think the dating scene nowadays, honestly, with, for example, apps like Tinder and or social media, mm, it idealizes only the receiving parts. It only kind of shows and concentrates on the feel good feeling, which is the feel good feeling is mainly the receiving,
Yeah.
right? Is when you get something, that's when you feel at its best. Obviously, people can feel good from giving something, absolutely, no doubt. You can feel good for, I don't know, giving your girlfriend a bouquet of flowers because it will make you happy, and seeing her happy makes you happy, kind of
Yeah.
idea, absolutely. However, in all honesty, absolutely receiving is what will feel the best.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's yeah, that's true. I agree, and I think that within social media, as you said, does misrepresent that a little bit, and even a lot. I would say with the dating apps per se, because what they present is what you're receiving, like the package you're receiving, and then like when do you really get to show what you are and what you bring in? But even then, I think that's a really good point. But there's like a lot as well, like to it, more than just that point. Given the fact that, for example, it, you know, social media by itself, the interactions that you have on there are in a lot of ways unlike what you would experience in person, of course, because they lack a lot of that physical aspect. But even then, in terms of what the interactions are, when you're put on a dating app, even more so than on social media, you're immediately in that kind of environment where you would need to kind of seduce the other person or kind of like make them interested in you. Whereas usually, like when you do get in a relationship or just in some sort of situationship, when you do, flirt with someone, it is very unlikely that you were seeking that specifically. Now, some people might, but at least in my
Right.
experience, and also I think in most cases, because a lot of the time you get together with someone who's one of your friends or a friend of your friend or someone who goes to the same school as you do, same, anything, same job, whatever. So I think that taking away that part, that crucial part, is what causes a lot of issues further down the line, because
Mhm.
you're getting to know someone, you're getting to understand how someone functions and what they expect from you and what they can provide, just based off of their best advertisement they can make for themselves. And yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a problem in
Yeah, yeah.
itself.
No, absolutely, absolutely agree. I think that's as you said, that's exactly the issue, and it links back wonderfully to what I was also saying about concentrating on the receiving part. Like, imagine, I mean, I pretty much spot on. It's an advertisement of of what you get, but not necessarily the reality. Not to mention that it really kind of destroys the whole process.
Yeah.
As you said, removes a crucial part out of it, where you essentially, I mean, it's essentially what it is. But for Tinder or like apps, dating apps like Tinder, you get a picture of a person, you'll have a relation to how they look, you have an idea of what you're getting into, and then you look at the description, see what they like, dislike. It's essentially, I mean, uh, what a profile. You get a profile of someone,
Yeah.
and just based on that, it tells you, hey, do you like this person? Do you dislike them? Which is, it can give you maybe an idea, but to kind of use that as a main way to get people together, I think is quite frankly awful. For that exact reason, because it's all advertised. Someone could, for example, say that they're, I don't know. Ah, man. I mean, okay, someone could lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, the most blatant one is that someone just could straight up lie. And you won't know any better because you just don't know them outside of what they've advertised on their profile.
Yeah.
Same with, I mean, absolutely same with fucking Instagram. How many times do you hear stories of relationships that look wonderful and go fantastic, and then, I don't know, one day on their fucking page you see, oh, we've broken up, therefore we're deleting the account.
It's,
Just like that, out of nowhere.
yeah.
It's crazy. It's absolutely, absolutely mental. It is. Quite frankly, people are forgetting the importance of well, going out and talking to people, essentially, so socializing, which absolutely can be seen as a challenge. Don't get me wrong, and I think that is partly because of the society that we currently live in, and how it treats socialization.
It
But
yeah, because you're saying about society and the society we live in and how it treats socialization. I think it also promotes and enables like isolation a lot more than it used to. And I
Mhm.
think that when you have the presence of those social media, you can easily just understand, or at least have the impression, be under the impression that those social media can replace like that socialization,
Mhm.
and you don't need to be doing those things like going out or whatever people do, because it's not only about like the most intense, like, oh, go in a club with 1,000 people there and
Oh
just
yeah, no,
you know
absolutely,
it can
yeah.
just be like coffee shop meetup that you find somewhere somehow with your classmates, whatever the hell. I feel like that's all being really like that is something that's slowly disappearing, or at least at the risk of disappearing, due to the fact that we always try to replace things with something that is simpler, easier. And we were talking about, how you're scrolling through, the short form content last week, and I think that ties in as well, because everything is made into something where, Tinder is the same thing as swiping up, but you're swiping to the side, yes,
Yeah,
no, and you're shopping for a partner, and that's problematic.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Well, most men tend to just swipe right until they get a match, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
No, but yeah, you're right. It is a. I mean, this really just goes back to last week's topic of just
yeah,
monetizing the human condition, right?
yeah,
But I don't
everything.
think we want to go off rails necessarily back to that
No,
topic
we
because
yeah.
we discussed it quite in detail. It's in some sense, It is the problem that you mentioned of simplifying. We want the simplest, fastest solution to our problems. But I think it's a lot of people don't realize that the complexity of certain solutions have added benefits of, well, quite frankly, being a better solution.
Yeah.
The way you get a solution might not necessarily, you know, in a more broad sense, it might give you the same solution, right? You might get the same thing, or you might think you're getting the same thing, but the way you achieved it adds a lot more to the experience. If you, for example, all right, hypothetical here, I think a lot of people would agree that if they were to either have to choose between normally getting to know a person, having to live a life where you get to know them every single day, eventually falling in love, and using that to, ask them out, going through the whole process of being in a relationship, getting to marry them one day, if that's your thing, would be way more worth if you just all of a sudden had a very strong love and urge towards somebody, and you just got married on the spot because they love you, you love them, fucking, it's the same destination, is what I'm trying to say. However, I think that there's a vast amount more of fulfillment from the from the first process. Even if it's the same exact destination, there's the process that you went through not only reinforces the relationship itself,
Of course.
it also adds that fulfillment that we were talking about, right?
Yeah. So by what you're saying, that's like what you believe to be like what you think is better, or what you think is like objectively better, like to make that
What
decision.
you mean the whole process of either getting that solution simply and fast,
Yeah.
or okay, so I okay, obviously, yeah, everything is my opinion at this
Yeah.
point. There's nothing that I can call truly objectively
Mm.
right. But if you're asking if I think this is a set condition on pretty much human beings, absolutely. And I
Mm.
don't think this goes towards only even like romance or love. I think that doing something and getting your hands dirty doing it.
Yeah.
There's actually that reminds me completely of like this old tale
Mm.
where it would be this king, right? And this king, he would like bread a lot, and he, whatever, we can call him a bread fanatic.
Okay.
He would just try different kinds of breads, and at someday he realized this, shit, guys, none of this bread tastes good anymore. Like, bring me something new. They bring him bread from all over places,
Mm.
but he just doesn't get the same level of satisfaction anymore. He doesn't like the bread the same way he used to. And then comes along this farmer. He's like, I will get you a piece of bread that you'll absolutely love, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what he does is he tells the king to come with him, and the king basically, uh, just to summarize the story, goes to this farmer's farm, and with him helps collect the grains, helps mill them down to dough, helps bake the bread, and at the end of it all, tastes this bread and realizes that he really likes it, and he has a farmer. Well, okay, what did you do? What happened that made this bread so much better than all the other breads I ate, right? And it's the work, is the effort, it is the reward, it is the fulfillment of doing this process yourself, getting down there, getting your hands dirty, and finally achieving the same thing. He still got bread. I mean, the bread realistically is literally the same bread he would eat at his throne, right?
Yeah.
Only that he had to spend days or maybe hours of effort and you know do it himself, get all that experience to arrive to the same point, but appreciate it way more for what it is. And I think that story is obviously, all stories are simplifications, but it's quite a beautiful one because of the fact that it raises the point of it matters. It definitely matters to sometimes do things what you think are the harder and what you think may be the harder and more complex way. Simpler and easier doesn't mean better.
Yeah, no, that's. I think that I agree, and I like that we looked at more generally, beyond within like what love could provide for you and how your experience could be with that, but also in general by by putting effort, then you can enjoy reap the benefits like in a more like intense way. But I also think that it comes with it can also connect to something that's a little bit different, but I also relate to, and I wanted to bring up for this episode is just the fact that having like real pleasure in your job, like in what you do, and it's not only job, but it's also obviously like having pleasure in maybe like the tougher parts of getting that relationship to work, like understanding that you have to go through this to, if there is distance, if there is a problem of like money or whatever, putting pleasure into that and like passion, like what's like really comes from within you and to want it, will put that perfection in the work. And I think that's like an Aristotle quote or something where it's like pleasure in the job puts no pleasure in the job post perfection in the work. So like if you were to like you could put a lot of effort into something and get something very good by the end of it and learn more and be more fulfilled. But also whilst you're doing that thing, if it's something that you really genuinely do love doing, you will do it even better. And so I think those two kind of correlate in a way.
Mhm. I
But
think
yeah,
that really also links back perfectly to what we talked about at the start of the conversation, with difference in romantic values, right?
yeah,
The more modern and the more, I don't know, 1800, 1900s type, where quite frankly, if you look at it objectively, in a sense, um, you could potentially say that both ways of love, one that is more about the actual feeling, the actual emotions, having this ideal kind of romantically bound relationship, and also the more man goes out, woman stays in uh, process that I refer to, they're both in some degree equally fulfilling, because of the fact that they both require work and effort, and both parties kind of, even though, let's be honest, in the latter example, are probably not as happy with their situation for women back in the 1800s,
yeah,
before gender equality, it would still give the fulfillment, and I would argue more fulfillment than it does for people that are just scrolling Tinder
yeah.
nowadays and looking for that fast and easy solution. Um, and yeah, purely because of the work, purely because of the effort to actually get to that point.
Yeah, that's true. And I do think that when it comes to gender equality and such things, there is obviously objectively like a reason to seek to have some form of equality within that dynamic and within a relationship. But it doesn't come, and I think we discussed this in the past, but it doesn't come in 50-50 on every single scale that you can measure. Like there are times where obviously, you know, a man doing more than a woman in some aspect and a woman doing more than a man in another aspect can balance out in the right way, and it really depends on the individuals themselves as well, because there is an existence, in my opinion, and I don't like when people necessarily like try to make it to like switch that around. There's an existence of things that are more like male energy driven, like and things that are more female energy driven, because that's simply how things have been. And sometimes you can kind of like break that concept, and sometimes a woman can do much more of what a man would do. And a perfect example is literally my parents. Like my mom does the typical man's job sometimes by being the one that works more overall, and my dad is the one. He has done a lot of like the being there for us as children, and he's been a great father. And he's he cooks a lot and stuff like that. And so you could say that that kind of challenges like what people are used to seeing. But I think it can work, and in other times it won't work. And the what really matters comes down to the individuals so much more than as we were saying last week about the view of people on social media and stuff, or in media, or the opinions of people on each other, like that matters much less than what you end up feeling at the end of the day as a child, like myself at the time, and of course as how my parents might have felt, or any couple out there could feel about that way of living, I guess. So yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's nothing I can really add on to that because it's all yeah. When it comes down to the brass of it, you said that there is more male driven, more female driven, but as you said, it's pure and mainly about the individual.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still ideology stuck from our more primal, more primal selves, I guess you could say. But I think we're leaning towards a world bit by bit, for the better or for worse. Personally, I believe, I don't see really any negatives, but we're leaning towards a world where anybody can do anything.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think that taking that fully literally is a good idea because, let's be honest, it's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
There's no way you can do anything. But for example, in the more relative aspect of, for example, gender equality or just any sort of equality or no, anybody can do anything. You can be the provider. You can provide in a certain way where it might not coincide with how women provided if you're a woman, or provide in a certain way which might not coincide with how men provided if you're a man, and it's fine as long as the relationship, as long as it's kind of that 50-50 that we talk about, the ideologically 50-50, the one where both feel like it's fair. I think it's completely okay, and I think it's important that we hit that kind of balance of people, because let's be honest, there's also two sides of this coin, right? There's people that either go about relationships nowadays like Tinder, for example, and there's still very taken back, close-minded, still conservative people that will hold off about the whole idea of not equality per se, but a man's job is a man's, a woman's job is a woman's. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
Way less, absolutely way less. But I think we need to hit that kind of spot in the middle where it's we don't get too far into the what can you provide, what can I provide, but we also don't go back to you can only provide this, I can only provide that. That's how it is, right?
Yeah. So I think this really concludes quite well what we wanted to talk about today specifically, and also introduces us a little bit into what we could be talking about next week. So this is a question or topic for you and for anyone watching as well. We just talked about what a man, what a woman can provide, and the opinions of either parties, and how they can, cause conflict in some sometimes, and also sometimes just cause for people to get together and agree on a specific thing. And it's kind of difficult to agree as a species. But what I wanted to bring up for next week would be more specifically going back towards what happens on social media and how that affects us, and specifically this generation. And this also comes with things like over sexualization, and also how we are introduced to it when we're younger, and how that affects how we see relationships, might it be romantic and also sexual. And the question specifically for next week that we'll probably start with is, when does empowerment cross the line and become exploitation? And this is obviously talking about, on social media with things like OnlyFans as well and stuff like that, and how that kind of does reshape a way of a lot of young people think, unfortunately, because it's just present everywhere you go. The over sexualization is obviously a big problem. So yeah, we hope to see you guys next week, and have a nice weekend, my friends.